I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer it honestly. Not the way you'd answer it to a friend, not the way you'd answer it if someone was watching, but the way you'd answer it alone at midnight when the noise of the day finally goes quiet and the truth gets a little harder to outrun. When was the last time your partner looked at you? Really looked at you? Like you were the most important thing in the room? Take your time. Because if that answer didn't come quickly, if you had to think about it, search for it, travel back further than you expected, then what I'm about to share with you matters more than you know. 3 years ago, a man named Daniel sat in his car in his own driveway for 45 minutes. He didn't go inside, that he just sat there, engine off, hands in his lap, staring at the front door of the house he'd lived in for 9 years. The house he'd chosen with the woman he married. The house his kids had grown up in. The house that was supposed to represent everything he'd worked for. And he couldn't make himself go in. Not because he was afraid of a fight. Not because something terrible had happened. Not because he didn't love his wife, Elena. He sat in that driveway because he realized, for the first time, with a clarity so sharp it almost knocked the breath out of him, that when he walked through that door, nobody in that house would notice. Not the way that matters. Elena would say hi. She'd ask if he wanted dinner. She'd hand him something to deal with, a bill, a school form, a problem with the dishwasher. And then she'd go back to whatever she was doing. And he'd go back to whatever he was doing. And the evening would pass. And then another one. And another one. And the weeks would stack up like identical boxes in a warehouse. And nobody would stop to ask what was actually inside any of them, that he wasn't unloved. He was unseen. And those two things feel so different in theory. But when you're living inside the second one, when you're going through the full motions of life with someone, sleeping next to them, raising children with them, building a future with them, and still feeling a loneliness so deep and so private that you can't even fully name it, theory doesn't help you much. Daniel didn't tell Elena how he felt that night. He went inside. He ate dinner. He helped with homework. He watched something on TV and didn't absorb a single second of it. He told himself it was just a rough week, that he was tired, that all couples go through phases like this, that it would get better when things slowed down, that he told himself all the things we tell ourselves when we're not ready to face what's actually happening. And here's what nobody tells you about the story Daniel was living inside of. Elena was telling herself the exact same things. She wasn't happy either. She also felt the distance. She also noticed that they hadn't had a real conversation, not a real one, where both people are actually present, actually listening, actually there for longer than she could remember. But she was busy. She was exhausted. She assumed Daniel was fine because he hadn't said otherwise, and Daniel assumed Elena was fine because she hadn't said otherwise. Two people, same house, same bed, same growing, aching, widening silence. Both of them are lonely. Neither of them said a word. This is the part of the story that breaks me every single time I tell it, because Daniel and Elena are not unusual. They are not a cautionary tale about bad people or broken people or people who never should have been together. They are normal. They are what happens to love when life gets loud enough and long enough and heavy enough, and nobody stops to tend to the thing underneath all of it. What was happening to Daniel and Elena wasn't a crisis at IT, was something quieter and more dangerous than a crisis at IT, was a slow departure. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that has no dramatic turning point. The kind where nobody cheats, nobody screams, nobody does anything wrong. And yet somehow, incrementally, invisibly, one or both people begin to leave. Not physically, emotionally. And by the time most couples realize it's happened, by the time the distance becomes impossible to ignore, they've been drifting for years. And closing that gap feels so overwhelming, so foreign, so far from where they thought they were, that some of them decide it can't be done. And they walk away from something that could have been saved, that if only they had seen it coming. That's why this video exists. Not to frighten you. Not to make you spiral about your relationship. But because the signs of a slow emotional departure are real, they are specific, and they're absolutely visible if you know what to look for. And most people don't. Most people are sitting in their driveway right now, metaphorically or literally, feeling something they can't name, carrying a loneliness they haven't admitted to anyone, loving a person they're slowly, quietly, unknowingly losing. And the only thing standing between where they are and where Daniel and Elena almost ended up is this: a conversation. So stay with me, because what comes next could be the most important thing you hear this year. Now, before I go any further, I want to be straight with you about something that I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not standing here in a white coat with a wall full of credentials behind me. And I think that's actually important to say out loud. Because the people who have helped me understand relationships most deeply weren't always the ones with the most letters after their name. They were the ones who had lived it, who had sat in their own driveways, who had eaten dinner next to someone they loved and felt completely alone, who had watched a great relationship slowly become a polite one, and either caught it in time or didn't dive in both of those people. And in between those two experiences, I became obsessed. In a quiet, relentless, I cannot stop reading and researching and asking questions way. Because I needed to understand why. Why do two people who genuinely love each other end up as strangers? Why does emotional distance grow so silently? And most importantly, what actually stops it? That obsession led me to research, and what I found completely dismantled everything I thought I knew about love. Dr. Helen Fisher, biological anthropologist at Rutgers University and one of the world's leading experts on the science of romantic love, spent decades scanning the brains of people in love, people who had just been rejected, and people in long-term committed relationships. What she discovered was both fascinating and sobering. Romantic love is not just an emotion, that it is a drive, a fundamental human motivational system, as powerful and as primal as hunger or thirst. And like hunger, when it goes unfed long enough, it doesn't just weaken that it redirects. Fisher found that when partners stop actively nurturing the neural reward systems associated with love, through attention, novelty, emotional presence, and genuine connection, the brain literally begins to detach. Not because the love disappears overnight, but because the brain, designed for survival, stops investing energy in things that are no longer feeding it. In other words, emotional neglect doesn't just hurt your relationship. The it rewires your partner's brain away from you. And then there's the landmark research from Dr. Robert Weiss at the University of Oregon, who's pioneering. Work on emotional loneliness revealed something that should stop every couple in their tracks. Emotional loneliness, the specific loneliness that comes from feeling disconnected from your romantic partner, is measurably more damaging to a person's mental and physical health than being completely alone. Let that land for a moment. It is worse, psychologically, emotionally, physically, to feel invisible next to someone who is supposed to love you, than to have nobody at all. That is what Daniel was experiencing in his driveway. That is what Elena was experiencing in her silence. And that may be what someone watching this video is experiencing right now. Science is not abstract. The pattern is not rare. And the path back to each other is absolutely real. But first, you have to recognize exactly what stage of emotional departure your relationship is currently in. Because there are stages, specific ones. And knowing which one you're standing in right now changes everything about what you do next. So here they are. The 5 stages of slow emotional departure. The roadmap that most couples never see, because nobody hands it to them until it's already too late. Find yourself on this map. Be honest, because awareness is the first and most powerful thing you have right now. Red circle stage 1, the drift. This is where it begins. And it feels like absolutely nothing. Life gets busy. Work gets demanding. Kids arrive, or careers shift, or stress accumulates. And without either person deciding to, you both start prioritizing everything else over each other. Not dramatically, just gradually. You stop asking deep questions. You stop sharing small moments. You stop being each other's first call when something happens, good or bad. The drift feels normal because it is normal in the sense that almost every long-term couple experiences it. But normal doesn't mean harmless. A slow leak can sink a ship just as surely as a storm can. The sign you're here. You can go an entire day, sometimes several, without a single genuine emotional exchange. Not an argument, not a connection, just logistics. Orange circle stage 2. The performance. This is the stage most couples spend the longest time in. And the most dangerous one to be comfortable in. On the outside, everything looks fine. You still say good morning. You still show up to family dinners. You still post photos together that get 100 likes. You perform the relationship fluently, convincingly, even automatically. But behind the performance, something has quietly shifted. You stop bringing your real self home. You've started editing what you share, filtering what you feel, shrinking the parts of yourself that feel like too much effort to explain. And your partner has done the same. You are two people playing the roles of a couple, for the kids, for the family, for the world. While the actual intimacy between you quietly starves, the sign you're here, you feel more yourself around friends, colleagues, even strangers, than you do around the person you share a bed with. Yellow circle stage 3, the resignation. This is where hope begins to quietly pack its bags. Point 1 or both partners stops trying. Not with anger, not with resentment necessarily, but with a kind of exhausted acceptance. They've brought something up before and it went nowhere. They've reached for connection and come back empty-handed. And so, slowly, they stop reaching. They tell themselves, this is just what marriage is. This is just what long-term relationships look like. Maybe I expected too much. Resignation is devastating because it masquerades as maturity. It looks like someone who has grown up, let go of unrealistic expectations, accepted reality. But underneath, it is someone who has given up on the possibility of feeling deeply loved by the person they chose. The sign you're here. You've stopped bringing up the things that bother you. Not because they've been resolved, but because you no longer believe they can be. Blue circle stage 4. The parallel life. By this stage, both partners have begun, unconsciously or consciously, building a life that doesn't depend on the other. Different friends, different interests, different emotional support systems. They are living in the same house, but on completely separate tracks. They are polite. They are functional. They are, in every way that counts emotionally, already living alone. The sign you're here, the idea of spending an entire weekend alone with your partner. No kids, no plans, no distractions. Feels uncomfortable rather than exciting. Black circle stage 5. The exit. This is the stage that shows up in a lawyer's office, or in a conversation that starts with, I think we need to talk. But here's what's critical to understand. The exit doesn't happen at stage 5. That it was decided quietly and incrementally, somewhere back in stages 1 through 4. Which means if you recognize yourself anywhere in those 4 stages just now, you're not at the end of your story. You're exactly where you need to be to change it. And the next thing I'm going to share with you is precisely how. Now I want to say something that most relationship content will never say. Something that goes against almost every piece of advice you've seen on your timeline, heard in a podcast, or read in a self-help book with a pastel cover and a hopeful subtitle. Are you ready? Not every relationship is worth saving. I'll say it again, because I need you to actually hear it, not just read it. Not every relationship is worth saving. The entire personal development space, including videos like this one, has a quiet, unspoken bias. A default assumption baked into almost every piece of relationship content ever created. And that assumption is this: if you just communicate better, love harder, try more, apply the right framework, any relationship can be rescued. That is not always true, and pretending it is doesn't make it noble. It makes it dangerous, because here is the reality that nobody wants to put in a YouTube thumbnail. Some relationships are not experiencing emotional neglect because both people got busy and drifted. Some relationships are experiencing emotional neglect because one person has been carrying the entire emotional weight of the partnership for years. Reaching, trying, initiating, apologizing, adjusting, shrinking, while the other person has simply chosen, repeatedly and consistently, not to show up. That is not a drift. That is a decision. And no framework, no technique, no secret bonus method saves a relationship where one person has fundamentally decided, consciously or not, that their partner's emotional needs are not their responsibility. That here's the contrarian truth that will actually set you free. Recognizing the stages of emotional departure is not just about saving your relationship. It's about saving yourself. Sometimes you go through this framework and you realize, with grief, with relief, with some complicated mixture of both, that you have been the only one trying to close the distance for a very long time. That every step toward reconnection has been met with indifference. That the emotional loneliness you feel isn't a phase or a season. It's a pattern that has been in place for years. And if that is your truth, then the most loving, courageous, self-respecting thing you could do is not double down on saving something that only one of you is fighting for. It is to grieve it honestly. to honor what it was, and to make a clear-eyed decision about what comes next for yourself and for anyone else whose life is shaped by this relationship. Staying in emotional starvation and calling it commitment is not strength at IT is slow self-erasure, and you deserve more than that. So yes, apply the framework. Have the conversation. Do the work, but do it with both eyes open. Do it knowing what you're looking for, and do it with enough self-respect to accept the answer you actually get, not just the one you were hoping for. That is what real love looks like, even when it's the hardest version of it. Here's something so unexpected it will feel almost strange the first time you tried it. I call it the childhood question. Attachment researchers at the University of California discovered something remarkable about long-term couples who maintain deep emotional intimacy over decades. They asked each other about their childhoods, regularly, deliberately, curiously, not surface questions. Not what was your favorite toy nostalgia, but real, tender, specific questions that reach into the earliest parts of who your partner is. Questions like, what is something you needed as a child that nobody gave you? What was the moment you first felt truly proud of yourself? What did you dream your life would look like when you grew up? Here is why this works on a neurological level. When your partner answers these questions, they don't just share memory. They reveal the unfinished, unguarded, most honest version of themselves. The version that existed before the mortgage, before the stress, before the drift. And when you receive that version of them with genuine curiosity and zero judgment, something that had gone cold quietly reignited. Ask one question tonight, just one. And then actually listen that if this video reached something real inside you today, don't let that feeling disappear the moment you close this tab. D, a one thing. Right now, go to your partner. Look at them and ask one childhood question tonight. That's it. That's where it starts. That if this helped you, hit like. It takes 1 second, and it helps this message reach someone who desperately needs it. Subscribe to Motivation Club for weekly content that goes beyond motivation, straight into the relationships, mindsets, and habits that actually build a life worth living. Comment below which stage hit closest to home for you. Warning disclaimer. This technique is shared purely for motivational and educational purposes and does not constitute professional psychological or therapeutic advice. Some individuals may find questions about childhood emotionally sensitive or triggering, particularly those with trauma histories. Please approach this practice with care, compassion, and sensitivity. If you or your partner are navigating unresolved trauma or mental health challenges, consult a licensed therapist or counselor before attempting emotionally exploratory exercises. Motivation Club content is designed to inspire, not to replace qualified professional support.